Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please, for the arrival of the Honourable Daniel Andrews, Premier of Victoria, the Honourable Anne Ferguson, Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, the Honourable Sean Lean, President of the Legislative Council, the Honourable Marie Edwards, Speaker of the Legislative Assembly, Angela Smith, Clerk of the Executive Council. Please be upstanding for the arrival of the Governor-designate and remain standing for the National Anthem.
The Governor-designate.
Please be seated. Distinguished guests, on behalf of the Premier, welcome to the inauguration of Professor Margaret Gardner as the 30th Governor of Victoria. My name is Jonathan Berg and I am the Official Secretary to the Governor. I would like to now introduce Uncle Perry Wandin, Wurundjeri Elder, for the welcome to country.
Wurundjeri, everybody. As you heard, my name's Perry Wandin, Wurundjeri Elder. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge all my ancestors, elders both past, present and emerging, and of course all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. And firstly, I'd like to acknowledge the both co-chairs of the First Assembly as well. My story, I live in a beautiful part of Hurlsville, and it's where my family have come off the mission at Corrandirk. William Barrick, my great-uncle, would love to be here today. He would certainly love to be able to make his presence felt. So I feel he's here with me, being able to pass on an acknowledgement and welcome to country here. For those, I'm sorry, those who missed out on the smoking ceremony, it is very, very special for any Aboriginal people in Victoria, around Australia, because any bad spirits that possibly have been brought with us today, we'd like to move them on to a better place. And with the ones that have been done just before, we feel so much better. So maybe that might be a tick on the next one. But please, I do like to thank everybody for letting me do this today, because it is really part of my family and my culture. But be able to speak to the people who actually look after Victoria, and with our First Nations people, we really need to come along in a strong way. And there's only one way to do that, and that is work together. As I was saying, my father was our last Narangita, James Juby Wandin, and I'm also very proud to say he was the first Aboriginal player to play for that mighty team, St Kilda. And the way they go after Hawthorn the other week, look, I do really think that my father's here too, because I got his eldership from him passing. He's been gone 17 years now. So to be part of that, and as I said, William Barrick as well. So I finish off in saying, Wurundjeri, welcome. Yumin Kundibik, Wurundjeri Wollumbaluk. And the Wollumbaluk is our clan. We're the last clan of Wurundjeri Wurrung people. And I do thank you again for allowing me to do this, and congratulations.
Thank you, Uncle Perry. I now invite the Premier of Victoria, the Honourable Daniel Andrews, to address us.
Ladies and gentlemen, can I begin my remarks by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet, and on your behalf thank Uncle Perry for his welcome to country. I want to make a particular acknowledgement of the co-chairs of Victoria's First Peoples Assembly, Negara Murray and Reuben Berg. I welcome you here. It is significant and very pleasing to have you here with us. Lieutenant Governor Professor James Angus and Helen Angus, Chief Justice the Honourable Anne Ferguson, former Governor-General the Right Reverend the Honourable Peter Hollingworth, former Governors of Victoria the Honourable Alex Chernov and Professor the Honourable David de Kretzer, former Premiers Brumby, Baillieu and Kennett, Consuls General and other international representatives that are with us today, to the Leader of the Opposition and to my ministerial and parliamentary colleagues, and the many, many other distinguished guests, too many to mention. Ladies and gentlemen, the role of the Governor is central to our democracy and our constitution. It's also, in many respects, unique in the way it balances the beautiful contradictions of our state: tradition and modernity, our reverence for the past and our steadfast focus on the future, our individual expression and our collective strength, our guardianship of the arts and our fanaticism about sport. Victoria is a place where difference is celebrated for the gift that it brings, and unity is prized for the shared values it delivers us. equality and excellence, pride and fairness. Friends, on behalf of the people of Victoria, I want to extend my deepest gratitude to our outgoing Governor, Linda Dessau, for her contribution to these shared values, for the work she did to invite Victorians into her home to keep the doors of Government House open for everyone, creating an unbreakable sense of belonging, even in the most challenging of times. I have no doubt that the Governor-designate, Professor Margaret Gardner, will continue to bring Victorians together and bring the most formal and solemn parts of our parliamentary democracy to the people and indeed to life. Here in the education state, I can think of no better person to lead from the front than Professor Gardner, a proud product of our public education system, a prolific contributor to academic thinking and the economy of ideas, through whose research has emerged a clearer picture of workers and workplaces, and someone who has steered some of our most iconic tertiary institutions through often uncharted waters. When Professor Gardner was appointed Vice-Chancellor and President of RMIT in 2005, she was the third person to hold that high office in 5 months. Professor Gardner foresaw early that education, and tertiary education in particular, needed to evolve and to adapt. It had to be flexible and nimble in order to stay relevant and to continue to meet the needs of Victoria's knowledge economy. Under her Vice-Chancellorship at RMIT, she oversaw a number of ambitious, now iconic building developments, projects that at the time others might have said were too big, too hard, too costly, too architectural. But those projects now ensure the bold vision and design on the outside reflects the imagination and dreams of the students on the inside. Of her time at RMIT, Professor Gardner said, "If you've got a strong sense of who you are in life, there are always new places to go." And I think that's true of RMIT. Well, I reckon that's true everywhere, indeed a truth to live by. In 2014, Professor Gardner became the first woman to lead Monash University. Not to be parochial, but it is a fantastic tertiary institution. Despite my less than stellar academic career, I'm sometimes considered a favourite son. I'm deeply grateful to them for that. During her time at Monash, Professor Gardner guided one of our state's most important and significant centres of learning, centres of knowledge and community of educators and students, navigating another transformative infrastructure program and indeed navigating a 1 in 100-year global pandemic. The Governor-designate is someone whose lifelong dedication to learning and service to education is quite remarkable. Ladies and gentlemen, our state is smarter, stronger, more creative and better equipped to turn challenges into opportunities because of her contribution to this point. And I know that I'm not alone when I say that I'm excited, we're all excited, I think, for what's to come. Friends, I was proud to recommend her appointment to His Majesty the King, and Victorians will be proud to call her their Governor.
Thank you, Premier. The Honourable Anne Ferguson, Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of Victoria, will now call on the Governor-designate to make the affirmation of allegiance and the affirmation of office. I invite the Chief Justice to administer the affirmations.
Governor-designate, I invite you to please stand and make the affirmation of allegiance, followed by the affirmation of office.
I, Margaret Elaine Gardner, do solemnly and sincerely affirm that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to His Majesty King Charles III and His Majesty's heirs and successors according to law. I, Margaret Elaine Gardner, do solemnly and sincerely affirm that I will well and truly serve His Majesty King Charles III and His Majesty's heirs and successors in the office of Governor of the State of Victoria, and will do right in all manner of people after the laws and usages of the state, without fear or favour, affection or ill will.
I now invite the Clerk of the Executive Council to place the oath book before the Governor-Designate. Governor-Designate, I invite you to sign the oath book. Chief Justice, I invite you to attest to the signatures. Thank you, Chief Justice. You may return to your seat. I invite the Clerk of the Executive Council to now sign the oath book. Thank you. The proclamation announces the assumption of the office of Governor. I now request that the Clerk of the Executive Council place the proclamation before the Premier. And Premier, I invite you to now stand and sign the proclamation. Thank you, Premier. You may return to your seat. Your Excellency, I invite you to now sign the proclamation. Distinguished guests, Her Excellency the Governor has now assumed office. Your Excellency, I now invite you to address us.
The Honourable Daniel Andrews, Premier of Victoria, Lieutenant Governor Professor James Angus AO, the Honourable Chief Justice Anne Ferguson, members of the Cabinet, President of the Legislative Council and Speaker of the Legislative Assembly, former Governor-General of Australia, former Governors of Victoria, former Premiers, the Honourable John Pesutto, Leader of the Opposition, permanent heads of state government departments, senior officers of the Australian Defence Force, members of the Consular Corps, distinguished guests, one and all. I begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands on which this House stands, the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung of the Eastern Kulin, and pay my respects to their elders past and present. I also pay my respects to any other Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people present today. I'm deeply honoured to be, very deeply honoured, to be the 30th Governor of Victoria. This state is a place so ancient and yet so new. The connection to land of those who are of the many continuing Aboriginal peoples in Victoria is different in kind from that of others, including the people who came following European colonisation and those who've arrived since then from across the globe, whether migrant or refugee. Yet I believe we all recognise the land so aptly described by Victorian-born Ethel Florence Lindsay Richardson, better known by her pseudonym Henry Handel Richardson. The scanty, ragged foliage, the unearthly stillness of the bush, the colours in the apparent colourlessness, the blue in the grey of the new leafage, the geranium red of young scrub, the purple depths of the shadows, to know a rank nostalgia for the scent of the aromatic foliage, the honey fragrance of the wattle, even the sting and tang of countless miles of bush ablaze. This is Victoria we recognise, we know, and we wish to conserve. We wish to better engage with the connections Victoria's Aboriginal peoples have to this land. And I believe the role of Governor can play a part in this engagement within the constitutional fabric of this state. Ours is a constitutional fabric that's been shaped by a democratic impulse that has driven Victoria ever since our separation from New South Wales in 1850. From the vantage point of 2023, we may forget that the story of Victoria is a story of people demanding to be heard. Victorians asked to be heard when they sought self-governance. Victorians on the Ballarat goldfields demanded to be heard on November 11th, 1854, when in their thousands they voted in support of the Ballarat Reform League Charter. That charter, which was presented to Victoria's first governor, Sir Charles Hotham, is the nearest Australia has to a declaration of independence. The handwritten copy of the charter, made by one of Governor Hotham's clerks, is a manifesto of democratic principles and demands. Among those demands, that it is the inalienable right of every citizen to have a voice in making the laws he or she is called upon to obey. There it is again. Voices demanding to be heard. That democratic impulse was partly realised after the Eureka Stockade, when Victoria cleared the way for men without property to vote. This at a time when owning property was usually the only way to be heard in parliaments across the world. That democratic impulse was partly realised again in 1908, when, following a 39-year battle, women in Victoria won the right to vote. Female suffrage only came after a momentous campaign, including the presentation of a monster petition measuring what we would now consider many metres in length, 260, as well as 19 attempts to pass legislation through the Victorian Legislative Council. Those Victorian suffragettes were persistent. They did not stop until their voices were heard. However, while the democratic advances of 1857 included all male Victorians, including Victoria's male First Peoples, the right to vote at federal elections set in 1902 excluded Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders, and so this franchise was not extended to all women and men in Victoria until 1962. The First Peoples Assembly of Victoria, which is today working to ensure the voices of Aboriginal people in this state are heard, is part of a democratic Victorian tradition. I want to acknowledge the newly elected co-chairs of this Assembly, Gara Murray and Reuben Berg, and wish them success. We might imagine the work of the First Peoples Assembly of Victoria as a chance for our state to, after 169 years, fully realise the ambitions of the Ballarat Reform League Charter. That charter spoke to universal rights that took many years to secure. Victoria now embraces all its citizens, and we can see the contours of modern Victoria in the diversity of those who were there back at the Eureka Stockade. Of the miners detained after the Eureka Stockade battle, only 3 were born in the Australian colonies. The other miners, some 100 or so, were from Ireland, England, Scotland, Wales, Italy, Corsica, Greece, Germany, Russia, Holland as it was known then, France, Switzerland, Spain, Portugal, Sweden, the United States, Canada and the West Indies. The Southern Cross flag was designed by a migrant. The first miner tried for treason and acquitted, John Joseph, was an African American. On this ancient land, there is no typical Victorian. This state is a place of many peoples and many cultures. In the time before colonisation, Aboriginal people spoke more than 30 different languages here on this land. There is ample space for the new and the ancient. There is room for the light that comes from many voices being heard. Victoria is a place of many people and many voices where, by listening to the experience of those voices, we can and shall grow wiser. That is why, as Governor, I look forward to being part of the journey with the people of Victoria as our future unfurls. I look forward to hearing your voices and learning from your experiences and being a part of the way we ensure that democratic institutions and your democratic impulse are supported and preserved. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. That now concludes official proceedings. Would you please now stand for the Vice-Regal salute, after which the official party will depart. Thank you.